Greetings, guys. Well, we are going to go off the rails today because this is going to be content that we don't typically do on this channel. But I want to celebrate the rebirth of Blackbird here. So for you guys who follow the channel regularly, you immediately recognize that Blackbird is back to life after about 7 months ago, a catastrophic cylinder head failure. But after a also almost 7-month back order on some cylinder heads from TrickFlow Specialties, I went with the Gen X series for my LS engine, and I couldn't be happier. Everything was an exact fit, and if anything, the car actually runs better than it did with my Lingenfelter heads before the catastrophe. So to celebrate, we are going to polish it up for the rest of the summer that I have available to enjoy my Trans Am. It's a 2000 Trans Am WS6, very heavily modified with a racing engine and supercharger, ProCharger supercharger, 710 rear wheel horsepower on the 6-speed manual transmission. But what we are going to do today is we are going to do a 3-stage polishing job. So obviously not normal content for the channel. However, if you are not familiar with this, it is, if nothing else, interesting to see that there is a lot more involved in how I keep this car looking new after almost 25 years. And there is a lot of technique with this that you may not be familiar if all you do is wash and hand wax your car. This is nothing like that. This is a whole procedure. Typically takes me about 6 hours to do, but we are going to polish this thing to make it look like a mirror. So there are some special tricks to this that if you are not familiar, you would want to know before you get into this, what kind of chemicals you're gonna need, what kind of tools you're gonna need, stuff like that. And if nothing else, it's kind of an interesting process. To really show this off, we are going to do the complete procedure step by step on just this right fender here. I'm choosing this right fender because there are also some minor scratches as well that we want to take care of, and I'll show you how to do that. And by only doing the one fender, we're going to be able to get a direct side-by-side comparison with, for example, the door or the hood, and you will see that it's going to be a very dramatic difference. First of all, let's go ahead and zoom in here. And if we look really carefully under the fluorescent light, we see we've got a lot of very, very, very fine scratches on the paint. Now that, as opposed to over here, we can see there actually is a scratch here on the paint. That is actually a scratch on the paint that you'll always hear people, oh, you can just buff that out, just buff it out. Well, let's see what is involved with just buffing out even a really small minor scratch like that. But for the rest of these, we see these are just very normal scratches that any car is going to have. I call them spider webs. They kind of look like circular patterns here, and that's of course from you drying off the car. If you go to a car wash that has the scrubbing brushes and everything, it'll tend to leave patterns like that. Generally not very noticeable unless you really look up close, but we're going to get rid of all these. This is going to be a dramatic difference when we're done. All right, let's take a look at some of the things that you will need. By the way, I am not compensated by any of the companies here, although I should be, but these are just what I go with. I tend to kind of favor Meguiar's for a lot of my chemicals and Porter Cable for my random orbiting polisher. So keep in mind there's a couple of different polishing tools here. You've got your orbital ones and your random orbit ones. This is a random orbit one. This is a model 7424XP. 7424XP random orbiting polisher. Again, the random orbiting polisher I recommend over a orbital polisher because it's easier for beginners. It does a lot more of the work for you, and you are less likely to do any kind of damage to the paint. If you go too heavy and too much pressure, especially on an orbital polisher, you can actually burn the paint or even remove it from the metal altogether at a point, and that would require some pretty extensive repair to repaint that area. So you really don't want to go heavy on this. Let your pads do the work for you. Speaking of the pads, there's all kinds. There's probably a dozen different pads with different cutting ratings on them. And that's one of the things I wanted to make sure you guys understand. You're going to hear through this video a lot of references to cutting, to abrasiveness, things like that. Stuff that will shy someone away who isn't familiar with this because they don't want to use any cutting materials on their paint, obviously, and ruin it forever. Well, just keep in mind that a heavy cutting pad like this orange pad versus a very fine cutting pad like this red pad, which essentially has no cutting. We're talking about a difference in cutting, like a paper towel would have a higher cutting factor than a tissue paper or toilet paper would. So we're talking in that range. We're not talking like 200 grit sandpaper or something. Actually, what we are talking is in terms of 2,000 grit sandpaper and 3,000 grit sandpaper, which this essentially feels like a, gosh, I don't know, like a really, really smooth surface. If you've ever used a knife sharpener before, maybe the smooth, fine honing on a knife sharpener, that's about what that feels like. And my 3,000 grit sandpaper feels kind of like cloth, actually. So when we talk cutting and abrasives, don't be scared. The worst that we're going to do, we are going to remove a scratch here that is, if you've never done this before, going to give you a moment of pause because it's going to look like we destroyed the finish. But believe me, we're going to be just fine. Also, I've got some polish here. Again, this is not wax, this is polish. We're going to use that with our cutting pads. I have some quick detailer. I use this to moisten up the pads. You want the pads to be pre-moistened. You can also just use water. This is some detailing clay. We're actually going to start off with this. And the detailing clay, this is Meguiar's detailing clay. We'll describe that in a minute. And then we're going to need a good car wax to finish off with. This particular wax I like for my car because this is called Car Crazy Wax. It's actually black, the car wax is. So it prevents that thing where you have that white residue that may be in the door panels, things like that. Okay, so let's start off with the first thing. And that is, we want to give the car a good wash, a good car wash. You can do this in your driveway. You can take it to a high pressure car wash or even a car wash at a gas station. Keep in mind though, that something's going to change permanently after you do this job. While this car is going to shine like a diamond, the surface is not going to be hard like one, quite the opposite. The surface is going to be extremely soft and fragile. Anything that touches the car other than a really fine microfiber cloth is going to leave those spiderweb marks in it again. So you can't take your car after we do this procedure to a car wash that has the rotary spinning brushes. You won't be able to use a sponge bath on the car and things like that. Anything that is more rough than a very fine microfiber towel, you're going to see scratches on the paint. We need to mind the cord on our Porter Cable XP here because the cord will have some abrasives. That is, the cord scrapes along the paint. You're going to see that in the paint job. So we've got to be very careful that nothing touches this paint other than a microfiber cloth or jet wash from like a pressure washer. Now, the first time we wash the car here, sure, you can do whatever you want, but just keep in mind, after this, everything changes. You can no longer go to any car wash because you can't use the ones with the rotary brushes and everything. You won't be able to use a paper towel to wipe off fingerprints or something. It's going to leave scratches. So just keep that in mind. Now, that said, we wash the car, and then the first thing we want to do is, before anything else, I want to remove the scratches. So I'm going to go and reposition the camera. We're going to take a look at our little scratch that I showed you earlier. Okay, so if we look, this is our scratch that we're talking about. This is something that if we really shine up the car, that's going to stand out. Now, this isn't a scratch like you got caught sleeping with the babysitter and your wife exacted revenge on your car scratch. This is kind of more a scratch like you rubbed up against the plastic trash can or something like that. maybe against the side of the garage door, or maybe you were wearing a belt while you were working on the car and just lightly scratched in. This isn't down to the metal or anything like that, but it is something that you can't just wipe and wipe and wipe with a buffing towel and have it go away. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to spray a little detailer spray on there. Spray a little on my 2000 grit sandpaper. We're just going to fold it over in half here. Use my 2 fingers, and we are very lightly going to go in a circular motion over that scratch. Very, very light. Just let the sandpaper do the work. And you want to go just until we see that the scratch is no longer visible. Now, when we're done with this, you know what? There's a little more over here. See some right here, a little bigger area. We're going to go over that as well. Now, when we wipe this dry, that's when the panic sets in if you've never done this before, because we've etched the clear coat, and you're going to see this is going to look really, really dull compared to the rest of the paint. Don't worry about it. The buffing is going to take care of that. Okay, so I think that should be good. Right now, we can get away with using paper towel or whatever because we're going to be buffing it. Now, after I buff it, I won't be able to. And now here's where your panic sets in. Look at what we did. Okay, the first time I ever did this, yeah, my heart totally stopped. But look how we've dulled this area terribly. Missed a little bit of scratches here. Let me go ahead and take care of that real quick. Okay, and now let's wipe that dry and let it dry for a second, and let's take a look. Okay, as you can see, my scratch is totally gone now, but it looks like we destroyed the paint in the process, doesn't it? All right, nothing to fear. Just going to spray a little more of my conditioner on there. We're going to go over with a 3000 grit sandpaper. All right, again, we're going very light here. Just, you can feel the sandpaper kind of grab the paint just a little bit. Honestly, this feels like notebook paper. This is the kind of cutting we're talking about. It's like notebook paper. This is not any kind of a thing like using steel wool or 60 grit sandpaper for a deck project. Okay, that should be good. Let's clean this up a little bit. Okay, and we can see now a fine line here where we've changed the haze a little bit, but it's definitely hazed. This looks like we ruined our paint, but we did not. Okay, so now what we want to do is I'm going to get my detailing clay, and we're not worried about this at all. As a matter of fact, I'm very, very happy with it because I can look and I can see the scratch is going to be absolutely 100% gone. So let's get our clay here. And all these little things I'm doing, like opening the clay with the plastic box on my paint job and everything, you got to get out of that habit after you finish the polishing job. Right now, I'm not worried about it. We're going to polish it anyway. But just even scraping that box, just like that, you would see that on the paint clear as day after we finish this job. So I can't stress enough. Keep that in mind. Okay, here's our detailing clay here. We're going to kind of soften it up a little bit. Use the heat from your hands to kind of warm it up, and it'll get real doughy. Kind of feels like Play-Doh a little bit. My hands are clean, by the way. All right, this is also a good time to introduce a new rule that applies for the rest of the job, and that is anything that touches this car, if I accidentally drop it on the ground, it goes in the trash, whether it's one of my pads, whether it's my detailing clay, whether it's my brand new microfiber towel, anything that touches the ground, you have to throw it away. This is because if anything picks up even the slightest abrasive or grit, the slightest, you are going to be streaking that all over the car. So anything that touches the car has to be absolutely pristine. Okay, now I've got my clay. I'm going to kind of roll it and flatten it out a bit. Kind of like that. It's about the size of my index finger maybe. Going to take my quick detailer here, and this is a little time consuming, but we are going to go over the whole car with this detailing clay. I'm just using my fingertips. You can actually kind of push into the clay a little bit, create some little indentations for your fingertips, and you're just running the clay over. Now, make sure you keep a good amount of your conditioner on here because the clay will stick to the paint otherwise. And as you're doing this, you will actually feel, as you're doing this, like right here, there's a little bit of grip with the clay. You can feel it kind of resisting, but after you pass over a few times, kind of go in a little circular motion too, you feel that it does that less and less and less, and that's because it's picking up the contaminants on the paint, and you can actually feel that this is going to smooth the paint out. See, like right here, it's really rough. You can really feel a lot of resistance, but as I keep doing this, it becomes smooth as ice. Now, as I keep doing this, I want to occasionally refold my clay to get some new clay. There's some new clay there. Also making sure my hands are staying clean. And I'm going to go over the entire vehicle. For this video, we're just going to do only this fender. I'll do the rest of the vehicle later. But we're going over the entire vehicle until we feel all the surfaces are smooth and even. Another thing, as you get good with this, you can actually feel with your fingers that is like glass. Whereas down here where I haven't done it, you can feel the difference. You can feel a texture almost here, but not there. I may just use my pinky here and just run my pinky along, and I can just feel with my pinky as I'm scrubbing along, like right there is a spot that I need to focus on. There, now it's smooth, and I can feel that with my pinky finger, and I can just test my work as I'm going. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and finish this panel, and then we'll come back for the next step. Okay, now we are ready to advance to the next step, and that will be starting our first cutting. Now, if we look here, even just the detailing clay actually made a big improvement here in the area where I removed my scratch. Let's take a look. Okay, we can see the scratch is completely gone, but the paint still has a little bit of a discoloration or haze to it compared to its surrounding area, but the scratch is completely gone. All right, not worried about it at all. We're going to make it absolutely perfectly shiny like a mirror. You will actually be able to read reflections of text off of it, in fact. You actually really will. All right, so our detailing clay, going over the entire vehicle with detailing clay, typically about 45 minutes is about what you can expect there. So now we're going to go in a sequence. Now I don't have to use all these pads here. There's green pads and different shades of blue pads and yellow pads. This is actually a yellow pad here. And they all have different cutting strengths. Your orange is pretty useful. This is as heavy as I'll go. This is a heavy cutting pad. By heavy cutting pad, again, we're talking like, this is like a paper towel, okay? This is the next stage. This is a little bit less. This is a medium cut pad. Just like with any sanding project, if you do woodwork or metalwork or something like that, you always kind of start with a rougher sandpaper and work to finer and finer before you paint, which in our case will be the wax. The blue cutting pad I'm probably not going to use, but this is an even finer pad than the yellow. It's between the yellow and the black. There also are green pads and different shades of blue. One nice thing about the blue pad, it's really good for glass. If you've got glass that you want to really make streak-free and really clean, I like using that on glass. Okay, the black pad is your wax pad. This has no cutting, so once you get past your yellow or your blue or a green pad, you are no longer removing the imperfections from the paint from the vehicle at that point. So if you still have some spider webs and things like that, you may need to go back and cover those areas with one of your cutting pads. After the black pad, your black and your red pads, these are not cutting pads. This is what I use as a wax applicator. And then this is what I use sometimes as a final step. You probably won't really even notice a difference, but this is just a final go over that's even finer than the black pad to really, if I go to a car show, for example, I may use the red pad. We'll cover that later. Okay, so if we look on the back of the pad, there's a Velcro. There's also Velcro here on our tool. I want to line that up exactly. I believe this is a 5.5 inch. Now with this pad here, I want to be very careful that it doesn't touch the dirty surfaces or anything in my tool chest. So we're always watching for that. And then let's plug in our cord and I'll show you a little trick for that. So at various places around my garage, I have these hooks that I'll hook my cord through to keep it well away from the car so there's no chance of dragging the cord across my new finish. Another trick is to take your cord and put it over your shoulder, and that'll be the shoulder that is facing furthest away from the car at all times so that you never drag the cord across your paint like that. Just even doing that, trust me, you're gonna see it. So I like to drag this over my shoulder like that, keep it away from the paint at all times. All right, one other thing that I think I'm gonna do to make this easier, it really helps to drive the car up on ramps or lift it up, put it on jack stands. But this way you're not bending over the whole time and really putting a lot of strain on your back. You want to save your back, so get the car up as high as you can to comfortably able to reach these areas without having to bend your back. All right, look at this really good working height, even for me standing up. Awesome. Okay, so we want to take our orange cutting pad. I want to put a couple of sprays of the Meguiar's detailer on there just to soften up the pad. Again, make sure your hands are clean. Pad is nice and soft. We see a little wetness there. Shake up our bottle of polish. Remember, this is not wax, this is polish. And we're just going to put a little bit of polish around here. You could also put it directly on the pad. I like to sort of stamp it around like that. You want to do this before you start your polisher because otherwise you're going to fling it all over the place. So do this with your polisher off. And now we're going to set our speed on the polisher. My polisher has speeds from 1 all the way up to 6. I usually go to speed 5. Now, never start the polisher until it is in contact with the car. If you start the polisher when it's not in contact with the car, you're going to fling the polish everywhere. All right. I'm using the lightest pressure, and I am letting the polisher do the work. I am not pushing down. The weight of the tool is really what's holding it against the car. All right, you guys probably can already see that there's a big difference already. All right, we're gonna go until the polish just starts to dry. Now, notice when I turned off the polisher, the same thing. I didn't pick it up and turn it off. If you pick it up and turn it off and you've got polish on your pad, it's going to fling everywhere. So you always turn off and on while it's still in contact. Again, I'm going to be very careful where I put this down. I don't want to put it face down on the floor, for God's sakes. I'm going to set it in my toolbox on its side, and it looks like I need a little bit more polish in this corner. Okay, we're going to work this corner now. I'm going to take the cord, make sure it doesn't drag across my work. This time I'm just going to put 3 or 4 dots of polisher right onto the pad. Again, stamp it around a bit and work it in. Okay, now set that very carefully. Watch my cord. Now, I can no longer use my paper towel anymore to wipe this off. I have to get a microfiber pad. Okay, I've actually got 3 microfiber pads. This one here is actually kind of a little bit rough. It's a little bit, and again, by rough, it's a little bit softer than the paper towel. This right here is typically what I use. I don't know, I just go by the feel. This feels really, really soft. This is nice, I like this. This one is super plush and soft, really, really soft. This one I'm going to use basically to wipe off the wax when I'm finished, so I'm going to set him aside. I usually keep these in plastic bags to keep them clean and everything. I'm going to use my kind of soft cloth, but not super, super soft cloth for the polish. All right, I use these towels new every time. I don't wash them, I don't reuse them. Just every time I do something like this, turn it around frequently, and we can already see that we've made a pretty dramatic difference just only using the orange cutting pad. We can see it's very different. Let's take a look at that next to a surface that we didn't treat. Okay, if we look, the reflection already looks so much better than it did before. Let's look over at a place that I didn't polish. We can see there's a lot more scratches there, particularly if we bring some light in here. So let's move to our next stage. Okay, on to our next stage. This is the medium cut. A couple of sprays of my conditioner. Dampen up that pad just a little bit. And for a lot of people, honestly, for your regular daily driver car, just what we've done right there with the orange pad, people would be more than thrilled with, honestly, especially on a 24-year-old car like this one. But we're going to take it a step further here. Really best to do 1 panel at a time for each stage. You don't want to really do the whole car at once on each stage, because if the polish dries completely, it's really hard to remove it. Okay, let's wipe this dry and inspect our work. Now at this point, you may start to notice some scratches that you missed, some imperfections that you didn't see before, but they'll stand out more now that it's a lot shinier and smoother. So you may have to repeat some of the process going back to your sandpaper even. But right now we're looking pretty good here, I think. Okay, got a little spot here I don't like. I'm going to repeat that. Oh, that's way better. Okay, one thing you'll also notice, I've cut off the tags from any of my towels. The tags are going to be much more abrasive than the towel. It's going to cause scratches. Polish up over here a little bit just with the towels to get a side-by-side comparison here. But boy, yeah, that's a huge difference. We'll give you a look. When I'm done with my towels, I put them up on the hood of the car or one of the surfaces I just treated, because we know that that's going to be cleaner than anything else I can rest the towels on. All right, look at that. That is almost like looking into a mirror. You can look at my reflection there and then compare that over here. Totally different. Now, the camera may not quite pick that up as much, but when you're looking at this overall, yeah, without question, it's a big difference. All right, grab something with some print on it. Look at that, that's almost like looking into a mirror. Then compare that over here. See, not quite the same sharpness and resolution. I think it's a little more dramatic with the hood. There, read that reflection right there versus untreated. That reflection right there. Totally different. Okay, but we can do better. I almost forgot. See if you can find where that scratch was that we sanded out earlier and the dulled paint that we had earlier. Totally resolved now with our polisher. No more scratch. Looks perfect. All right, as it stands now, we are probably beyond what a showroom finish would be. Pretty much any car owner is going to be thrilled with the way this car looks. But we are going to take it even a step further here. So now I'm going to put on this blue pad right here. This is going to be very, very fine. Get rid of even the most minor of imperfections. I do see there are some scratches on here that I probably should go back even with maybe the orange pad, but there's only a very, very few of them, so I'm not too worried about it. For the vast majority here, this looks as smooth as a mirror. So let's, one more time with our polisher. I'm pretty happy with this. Again, just letting the tool do the work. And the tool kind of goes where it wants to. I kind of guide it a little bit. It's got a little bit of a randomness to it, and it'll want to go this way, and then this way, and then this way. Just let it go. Just keep it in control, but don't really steer it so much. Okay. Oh, wow. Amazing. Okay, our last step here, we're going to apply some wax using our waxing pad. In this case, this will be my black pad for the wax. All right, just for comparison, we're going to wax up here too. This didn't get our 3-stage treatment, but we're just waxing up here. And that'll give us a side-by-side comparison. All right, there we go. A little bit of light there. Really, really catch any imperfections, holding a light right up to the paint. But bring it up here. Look at all those spider webs. But it still looks amazing, the car. But this just looks stunning. Absolutely stunning. All right. All right. Well, I've got to finish up the rest of the car, and then it's time to go cruising. So thanks for watching. I really hope you found this interesting. I know it's not normally what we do, but I thought maybe you'd be interested in it. And welcome back, Blackbird. I am so happy. All right, guys, we'll catch you next time. We'll do a diagnostic video next time, I promise.